Steiner, and welcome to tonight's edition of the Robust Opposition. I've got two great guests with me tonight, so we're going to get right into it. This is a North Carolina focused show for those of my viewers in other states. So Governor Roy Cooper issued Executive Order 80 in 2018 and Executive Order 246 in January 2022, committing the state to reduce economy-wide emissions 40% from 2005 levels by 2025 and at least 50% from 2005 levels by 2030. House Bill 951, which Governor Cooper signed into law in October of 2021, directs the Utilities Commission to, quote, take all reasonable steps, unquote, to reduce carbon dioxide emissions from Duke Energy's electric generating facilities. The plan sets a goal of 70% reduction in carbon emissions by 2030, just 7 years from now, and by 2050, Duke should have achieved carbon neutrality. The commission has the flexibility to delay these benchmarks by up to 2 years or longer if nuclear or wind power requires more time to be built or to maintain the reliability of the grid. Now, here to discuss the plan, which needed to be approved by December of 2021, are two longtime climate advocates. Jim Warren is a native of Graham, North Carolina, and earned a degree in business administration with accounting from UNC Chapel Hill. He has been active in public interest issues for 40 years and executive director of NC Warren since 1993. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thanks, Lauren.
Dale Evarts spent 20 years with the US EPA, that's the Environmental Protection Agency, charged with reducing air pollution and bringing healthy air to everyone in the United States. As leader for the Climate and International Group, he worked with the United Nations to negotiate an international agreement to reduce harmful mercury and to initiate a global partnership on short-lived climate pollutants such as methane, which we'll be talking about tonight. He also worked with officials in China to help reduce pollution. More recently, he's been working with NC Warren and others on energy policy and energy justice, and with local officials in Durham on renewable energy. He also volunteers with Sustaining All Life and United to End Racism, groups that seek to end the climate crisis while addressing the inequities caused by racism and other forms of prejudice. Welcome to the show, Dale.
Thank you, Lauren. It's great to be here.
Well, I want to start by talking about how these executive orders and how this piece of legislation got started in the first place. Jim, talk about the public pressure that happened behind the scenes to get Governor Cooper to do all this.
Well, about 10 years ago, Duke Energy embarked on a massive expansion of the use of fracked gas. And in fact, the CEO at that time called it the backbone of their corporate future. And so along the way, there's been a lot of pressure. Gradually, more and more groups realize that replacing coal with natural gas is just a crazy strategy, as now 45 scientists have been openly telling Governor Cooper. Along the way, Duke Energy's done lots of greenwashing, and frankly, Governor Cooper has gone along with a lot of it. He has never acknowledged that we just simply cannot keep building fossil fuel facilities around the country, and that's reflected in the executive orders and in the carbon plan strategy. They deliberately ignored any mention of methane and went along with this pretense that somehow adding scores of gas burning units as part of this future it makes climate sense. Cooper is reportedly running for national, or wanting to seek national office or a position. And he's made a lot of noise about the climate crisis, but so far he's gone along with Duke Energy's expansion of gas, which is just a climate wrecking strategy.
Right. So you think that when he did this, what I'm trying to get at is he obviously did something. Julie Mayfield, who was on my show, feels very strongly about this. What happened was when it first came out, the Sunrise Movement in Asheville was, criticizing her for supposedly cooperating with Duke Energy to come up with this plan. And I spoke to her about it because she had been on my show. She was one of the first public officials I interviewed when I moved here. And she said, that's not correct. I've never had a single meeting with Duke. I was cooperating with the Republicans, as she is wont to do, in order to get anything done in a state that is dominated by Republicans. So she said, don't worry, Lauren, the North Carolina Public Utilities Commission members were all appointed by Cooper, who's a Democrat, and I trust that they're going to do the right thing. So now you're telling me he's kind of what we call a dino, a Democrat in name only, and maybe, more beholden to corporate interests than your average progressive Democrat, sort of like your AOC Democrat.
Well, Cooper does good on a lot of fronts, but in terms of energy and climate, he's not walking his talk. It is good that he has drawn attention to the climate crisis, as if all the repeated hurricanes and superstorms that are hammering North Carolina communities, especially the most vulnerable communities, over and over, that's drawing a lot of attention too. But so far, Governor Cooper has gone along again with this idea that adding huge amounts of fossil fuels, as we are already well into a horrible climate crisis, somehow is a transition and somehow should be lauded. And meanwhile, Duke Energy's even the commission has gone along with Duke Energy capping the growth of solar in this state, which is something that Duke's greenwashing has sort of obscured.
It's interesting that you mentioned how they say it needs to be a transition from, that's why they called it a bridge fuel, to go from coal to renewable. And in 2010, I wrote an article for the LA Progressive on the Beyond Coal campaign, which was a campaign of the Sierra Club and Greenpeace, which was getting us off of coal and getting us onto natural gas. And in 2010, I didn't know about natural gas. It sounded good to me. But in 2012, when I first learned that it came from fracking, I became an immediate fractivist, and for almost 10 years worked on issues trying to fight fracking and get setbacks in Los Angeles and in the state of California. But I think you guys might remember that Carl Pope, who was the president or the executive director of the Sierra Club back then, ended up having to resign because it turned out he took a $10 million contribution from Chesapeake Energy, which was the largest producer of natural gas. So now there's great education in the country that it's really not a bridge fuel, that methane is 80% more potent to greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. And yet in this article I read in the North Carolina Policy Watch, they said the word methane was specifically left out of HB 951. Right. And in fact, it was something that Duke hung its hat on when they released this plan. What are your thoughts about that, Dale?
Well, it's clear that, one, I thank you for all you did in Los Angeles to raise the issue of frack gas and methane. I think one of the good things that's happened over the past 10 years is that we're a lot more knowledgeable now of the dangers of methane. And that's in part due to the work that Jim and his colleagues, Connie Leeper, others at NC Warren and other statewide organizations have been doing to raise awareness about its harm to our environment and obviously to public health and to climate. So that part I'm pleased with. I think there's much more awareness of it. The fact that we now call it not only frack natural gas, but frack methane gas is a sign that things are moving in the right direction. I think, obviously because of that, keeping the word away from the public as much as possible is part of the sales job on the carbon plan and on some of the work that's being done. One thing I should mention is that it's very, the old bridge fuel thing that keeps being brought out here in various forms. It's losing a lot of its appeal, clearly, here in North Carolina. We haven't done much with building new gas-fired power plants here, though they continue to be proposed by Duke Energy, and Jim can give you more details on that. But it's now to the point where we're just not going to be doing it. It's as Drew Shindell says, in commending Duke for doing something that moves us closer to a renewable energy driven clean future, that having any gas in that future is like driving slowly towards the cliff, even though you're going to be going over the cliff eventually. So Duke is still going, as a corporate monopoly, is still trying to drive home the strategy of building bigger things that will make them more money under the monopoly system, and that's not good for our future, and obviously not is a dangerous outcome.
Well, in the article that I read about the plan, the commission made a point of saying there are not any specific gas generating plants being built that are referenced in this plan, but they are relying on natural gas. So you have to wonder where it's going to come from. They also talk about how the pipelines, the Dominion pipeline was not approved, and the Mountain Valley pipeline looks like it's going to be killed. So where are they going to get this gas from? But I want to get back to, the legislation and the plan to come up with a plan. Were either of you surprised when the Utilities Commission tasked Duke with writing the plan as opposed to hiring some independent firm to come up with it?
We criticized it at the time and ever since, and others have too. They should have never let Duke start off on its own doing that. But that's reflective, Lauren, of the widespread deference in this state to Duke Energy by both political parties over a decades-long period of time. On a good news front, the Dominion project you mentioned, the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, Duke Energy was actually the senior partner in that project in some ways, and together they made an $8 billion mistake, and that was reflective of opposition. So there's hope in this whole long fight that we've been undergoing. Frontline communities backed by other organizations around the state blocked and stopped the Atlantic Coast fracked gas pipeline after 6 years and $5 billion spent. So it's not surprising that the commission did that and other things to slant the process in favor of Duke Energy. They rigged it where they wouldn't. They effectively denied the ability for a number of the expert witnesses on our side to even be able to testify in the case. And so I won't get into all the details of that, but it's not surprising. It wasn't a big surprise that the commission went along with Duke's plan. Again, that's one chapter in what's already a decade-long fight against Duke Energy's reckless expansion of frack gas. Duke Energy being one of the very largest climate polluters in the U.S., the largest power providing climate polluter of all.
Well, I was watching this thing like a slow train wreck because I was here from the time when the law was signed. Well, no, 2 months after that to the present time. So I just moved here about actually 2 years ago yesterday.
Welcome.
Welcome to North Carolina.
Thank you. But so when this happened, I immediately called Julie Mayfield and I said, look, is there any way we can find someone on the commission who can advocate from our position from the inside? You know, this was after this horrible plan was first unveiled, before they had the public hearings, because I had a successful example in Los Angeles of we convinced Garcetti, Mayor Garcetti, to go against the municipally owned water and power plan to invest $6 billion in 3 aging gas plants, when one of our own, our activist, Aura Vasquez, was appointed to the commission, and she spoke out publicly in the Los Angeles Times against this. And of course, Garcetti, who was positioning himself as this great climate leader, wanting to run for president, you know, was kind of embarrassed and had to back out of it. But we had someone on the inside. Similarly, Governor Newsom, who was endorsed by the nurses union because he was going to supposedly give us single payer health care, ended up appointing a commission instead, a classic stalling tactic. And we worked with people on the inside, you know, from the nurses union, so that the commission eventually came out with their recommendation that a single payer system, although they didn't call it that, it's what they meant though, was what they recommended. So I mentioned this idea to Julie and she said, no, none of the commissioners would ever do that. But we have the public staff who is supposed to represent the consumers and the public. So that was kind of a false setting my mind at ease, because now we see that the public staff, I mean, I'm looking at this chart where the public staff proposed even less solar. Let me see if I could share this screen on here. Let's see, I gotta do this. Gotta go share screen. I've gotta go to this. Are people seeing this?
No.
We're not seeing it yet.
No, let me go on Facebook and see. I'm so confounded by this technology. No, we're not seeing it. Why aren't we seeing it? StreamYard. I think I have to do this. Chrome tab. Here we go. This should work. See it now?
Very small to me.
Oh, let me see if I can make it bigger. No, I don't think I can. Well, basically it says the Duke Energy proposal was 3,100 solar. The public staff proposal was 2,630. And then they have these other alternative proposals. The Attorney General's office was more, 3,100. Well, they agreed with Duke. Tech customers are 3,450. CPSA, which stands for Clean Power Suppliers, understandably, they were at 4,800. And NCSCA, which is the North Carolina Sustainable Energy Coalition, was at 4,000. Anyway, if you can't really see it, it's boring for me to repeat these numbers. But what do you make of the fact of, we have a different layout. I like this one. Let's keep this one for a while. That the public staff wasn't really representing the public, because we had all these hearings. We had 4 hearings in July. We were unanimously opposed to Duke's plan. I know I testified here in Asheville. All 30 speakers spoke out against it. And it was like, I don't know, they completely ignored us. Do you feel like the plan was improved at all since the public hearings, or not?
Not much. You know, the commission basically went along, and the leadership of the public staff went along with it. And by the way, there are good people in both of those entities, the commission itself and their staff and the public staff. But the leadership has tended over many years to be influenced for whatever reasons, and to go along largely with what Duke Energy wants to do. This carbon plan is an extension of a long-running 15-year planning process, and each time Duke Energy comes forward, the commission pretty much gives them what they want to do. And by the way, you mentioned earlier that they haven't officially approved any new gas units yet, but they paved the way with the approval of the carbon plan to allow Duke Energy to build dozens or scores of gas burning units. And by the way, those apparently would be in the same communities that they've been polluting all these years with coal and coal ash and gas emissions too. But I should defer and let Dale comment on that important question too.
Yeah, I think I can't, I can't tease out exactly why the public staff went with what they did. I didn't see all the details of the modeling they did to come up with those particular numbers. I agree with Jim. There's some good people there, but we're in a regulated monopoly system, and that's over 100 years old, 120 or so years old. It's way outlived its relevance to the economy of North Carolina in particular, and both the good people, the good folks, smart folks at Duke Energy, the smart folks at the Utilities Commission those staffs are all beholden to this particular system. And Duke Energy is a investor-owned utility, an IOU. That's an interesting acronym, because it ends up the ratepayers pay for their shareholders, retirement, their shareholders' interests. And so that's, Duke Energy has the interests of the shareholders, holds them primary, and North Carolina suffers as a result of that. Right. What I find, I really am not surprised. I am disappointed by the outcome of the carbon plan, but I also want to note that every 2 years it has to be revisited. And what wasn't included in this particular planning, the modeling that went into this planning, including the modeling from the more renewable friendly organizations that supplied their modeling, is the Inflation Reduction Act. All the monies that are going to come down from that, and all the incentives for solar, for energy efficiency, for electrification, all these things that really are going to change the landscape here of renewable energy and solar energy here in North Carolina. I think, and particularly in low and moderate income communities, that's part of the Justice 40 initiative of the federal government. So I think I'm really looking forward to seeing how we can, over the next year and a half, really plug into those incentives, plug those into the forecasts, and see what comes up at the next round that we have of this carbon plan.
It's interesting because what also wasn't included in the modeling was the Russian invasion. And we see what's happened to the price of natural gas. Now, it's come down, gasoline. Natural gas, I don't know that the price has gone up so much here, but in California, it's 5 times what it used to be in 1 month. And they're saying that's directly attributable to the invasion. And we know that what we're trying to do with all of our fracked gas is liquefy it and send it to the coast, so that we can, sell it to Europe. I did a whole show in which I opined, it wasn't just my idea, but a lot of other people think that this was one of the reasons we provoked them to invade Ukraine, was Nord Stream 2 was about to go online. Germany was already getting 55% of its gas from Russia. They were going to be getting 80% of their gas. And we want to sell them our liquefied natural gas. So obviously, the whole idea of Obama quadrupling fracking so that we could become energy independent was a complete lie, because we're still continuing to export it. We used to have a rule that we couldn't export oil or gas in this country, but now we don't have that rule anymore. So it's all about the profits of the industry. But, what's interesting is you talk about the ratepayers. 2 days ago, it was in the news that Duke has applied to the commission for another increase, which is going to amount to 15.7% over the next 3 years if it's approved. And, they're saying, in their PR, they're saying that it's supposed to cover making the grid more resilient to extreme temperatures and also powering more electric vehicles. But as we can see, we just had the big cold snap, and they actually had to have, blackouts, rolling blackouts in order to get power to the people. So it's not such a reliable source after all. Now, I'm interested as an activist and an organizer in, how we, environmental organizations, coalitions of organizations, individual activists can make a difference. I know, Jim, you have a 30-second spot, which I can't figure out how to get the audio to play in this platform, but I will post it in the comments. A 30-second spot that you're encouraging people to contact Governor Cooper. You also have a handy dandy form that people can fill out. It's already a pre-written letter, but people could customize it if they want. Tell us about the extent of this campaign. How many markets are you running it in? How much are you spending on it? Have you noticed any results? Are you keeping track through your form, through your platform, how many letters have been sent?
Yeah, people can go to stopdukeenergy.com. Stopdukeenergy.com is a place that they can see the 30-second ad. They can see earlier iterations of that ad from a couple of years ago. Overall, we've generated many thousands of contacts to Governor Cooper. We have up there the scientist letter that was signed last fall, led by Dr. Drew Shindell, to Governor Cooper and CEO of Duke Energy, calling for them to stop the expansion of frack gas. And a key takeaway there is, as Dr. Shindell has been telling Cooper for 3 years, all of Cooper's good climate efforts are overmatched if they continue allowing Duke Energy to expand the use of gas. And so people can see that information directly there. And I am actually optimistic in an overall sense about this campaign. Again, it's been going on a long time, but Duke Energy is facing a lot of headwinds. You mentioned the economics that, they can't win a case to build new gas units any longer under the least cost test, because solar with storage is cheaper now. And all the trends are going in the right direction. We need to especially be focusing on more distributed renewable with storage, along with energy balancing and saving programs. But having more rooftops, parking lots, big box stores, schools, others generating electricity right there, storing it there, using it at night. Duke Energy wants to put tens of billions of dollars into the grid system, because that's how a monopoly makes money, investing lots of money and raising people's rates over and over again. So there's an economic injustice that has been pervasive in North Carolina for a long time too. And we simply have to stop Duke's trajectory for that reason, along with the climate crisis that is harming so many people.
Now, let me ask you a question about that. In Los Angeles, I happen to have influenced a local councilman to pass a law that said all new rooftops had to have solar. And he, in the process of that happening in Los Angeles, the governor, Gavin Newsom, superseded that by making that like an executive order. So all new buildings had to have solar. And of course, when I moved to North Carolina, not knowing what I now know about a Dillon's rural state versus a home rule state, I said, well, maybe we should do that in Asheville. Maybe we should have all new construction has to have solar. And I was quickly educated, like, you can't do that unless an idea like that comes out of Raleigh. So I want to know, obviously, this was a bipartisan bill, this HB 951. And I did learn at one point that the Georgia Tea Party was actually working on behalf of solar power, because, Republicans that would be in the Tea Party believe in small business, and there was a large industry. There was a large solar industry that they were trying to support. So I'm wondering if there's any sort of backdoor way we can get this distributed energy by working with our legislators, specifically Republican legislators, to see if we could do something like that in North Carolina. And also, how big is the solar industry in North Carolina? Do they have any clout, any influence?
Go ahead, Jim.
Well, I'll give a short answer, and Dale, maybe you can pick up on it. I mean, the good news is, Lauren, a number of Republican leaders, Representative John Soka, who's now just gone out of office in the House, he and others have been complaining about the monopoly control of this state for a number of years, and that level is increasing. Honest conservatives don't like monopolies any more than folks like us do, and we need competition, and that's the thing that Duke Energy fears the most. So I am kind of optimistic that some of the. Meanwhile, real briefly, Duke Energy's been trying, as you know, to stifle the growth of rooftop scale solar because it's the competition to them to have people own their own solar and businesses and academic institutions and others, and they're losing that fight as of right now, and we will be expecting a commission decision soon. It's probably going to go to court, the Court of Appeals, one way or the other. And the Attorney General is on the right side of that, has made a beautiful legal case. Representative Soka that I mentioned has weighed in. 17 rooftop solar companies are on our side, pressing the governor to get involved and help prevent Duke Energy from continuing down this climate wrecking direction they're trying to take us in.
Are you talking about something they're trying to do to limit net metering?
Yes, very much like the attacks on net metering in California and other states by monopoly utilities who don't want to have to compete with customers owning their own generation and storage.
And I'll just build on what Jim said. It's a couple of things. One, there's more jobs in the renewable energy, particularly solar energy, in North Carolina than there are in any other form of energy. So it's grown quite a lot. We had for a while a requirement, a renewable energy standard requirement in North Carolina that was continuing to be ramped up. California has this as well. So a certain percentage of our electricity had to come from that. It was stopped in about 2010 or 12, I believe. Jim probably knows the more exact date. And up to that point, that grew our solar industry quite rapidly. We were the second in the country behind California in solar energy. We're now down to about fourth, I think, because again, that was that plateaued. Instead of continuing to increase the percentage, that plateaued. And the other thing I'll say, I completely agree with Jim in terms of local energy. This is the direction things are going economically, practically speaking. And I can see where if you're a Duke Energy executive and you're trying to hold on to power, you've been used to delivering power from a large power plant out to the homes and making sure it's dependably delivered. This has been the model for 100 years, but we're sitting in the same position as telephones in the 70s and mainframe computers were in the 70s. The utility industry has not changed since the 70s from that, and that's a key thing. That's a really good analogy, because how do we deal with our phones now? We've got computers that rival those mainframe, those large, took up a whole floor mainframe computers from the 70s in my hand. So that kind of innovation was able to happen when we broke up the monopolies. And I'm seeing that unless Duke Energy can really build into that stream and start offering things that meet both the needs of our climate, the needs of its customers, particularly low and moderate income customers, it's going to have a really hard time. I think Jim's right. We're headed in the right direction, and they're resisting it because the model that they have is all they know.
Yeah, before we go, I want to talk about two other components of the plan, nuclear and wind. Nuclear is very expensive. We got them to close down San Onofre in the San Diego area after they had a leak, and when they were supposed to close Diablo Canyon in 2025. And Newsom and the entire legislature were in league to keep it going because of the terrible heat wave that California had this summer and the need to keep generating power. So that was a big setback for our movement. But in North Carolina, I guess there's 3 nuclear plants. I don't know how aging they are and what they want to do with them, but it is very expensive. It's very expensive to insure. No private company will insure it. The government has to be the insurer of last resort. We have the problem with leaks. We have the problem with nuclear waste. And they're talking about these, small modular units, but so far none of them have come online. It seems like pie in the sky.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think that nuclear is like dead in the water here?
Well, I don't know. Not quite yet, but Duke Energy already dragged us through this horror movie. Duke and other Southeast utilities in particular spent 13, 14 years and billions of dollars trying to build the Westinghouse AP1000. And they lost all but, the Georgia project might come online one day at an exorbitant cost overrun, but Duke Energy and the others already failed. And so we know how that game goes out. We don't need to be gambling on pipe dream technologies that they don't even have a design approved for the small modular reactor. And as you say, it's going to be way too expensive. We know the things we need to be doing to decarbonize quickly. And by the way, that's one of the big advantages of, as Dale said, local solar with storage. It is quicker, faster, cheaper, best way to decarbonize. And we need to
resilient.
We need the governor's leadership and other elected officials to use their bully pulpits and be talking about it, and not just go along with every new thing that Duke Energy wants to chase for years into the future.
Now, wind, apparently there's only 2 wind plants that are onshore that they're using right now. It's very difficult to site those things, apparently. And offshore, it takes years to build. But as soon as the Inflation Reduction Act passed, apparently Duke filed for a permit to build one offshore. So that's a positive step, right?
Right.
Yeah, we would like to see them quit blocking the other things that we need to do, and really get serious about trying to help protect our economy and the local communities that are being hit by these climate crises over and over. And we need the governor's leadership. We do appreciate Attorney General has done some good things, and some of the Republican leaders have. We need to be moving in that direction.
Now, let me ask you something. The governor is termed out, and so Josh Stein is going to be the new nominee. When is that election? Is that 2024? And can this be something that we can use if all the organizations get on board with it as a way to, either endorse him or withhold our endorsement from him? Is any movement like that afoot?
I'll let Dale field that because we're a 501c3 organization. We can't get involved in election politics, but I'll let Dale comment on that.
My sense is, as somebody who wants to see this happen in North Carolina, I would be pushing any candidate, including Josh Stein. Obviously, Josh Stein has put forth of his proposals and stood, taking some strong stands for renewable energy and for more progressive, less gas-filled futures for North Carolina. So I think he's a good candidate to back, but there'll be other candidates there, Republican and Democrat, that I think should be able to take stands on this, and that would be useful to have a broader conversation than sticking to just a single candidate.
One thing you might want to consider that we found very effective in California was a pledge that you have all candidates take, that they're not going to take any money from oil or gas companies, or you can even include utilities, because Duke being the biggest contributor. Right. That may be something, because we know that the influence of money in politics is huge. And I'll say, even in California, where we have a Democratic governor and a Democratic legislature, there's 3/4 of the legislature are Democrats. They don't even need a single Republican to pass a tax increase. We just found out that the head regulator of the public agency that regulates oil and gas resigned, because it turned out there was a big investigation by Capital in Maine, an independent news outlet, that found that permits have gone up 745% this year. And even though we were very successful in this long-term plan to make sure that there would be no oil drilling within 3,200 feet of a school, home, or business, of the 222 drills that were approved, wells that were approved, 100 of them were within that setback zone. And then they come to find that, the Western States Petroleum Association, which is the main lobbying group, spent $30 million on lobbying and candidate contributions just in the past legislative session alone. And they spent another $20 million on this ballot initiative, which they just qualified by paying signature gatherers, to repeal the setback legislation. Yeah. So this is in California, which leads the nation on environmental policy. So you kind of wonder, what's the situation in North Carolina? Is there any group that tracks how much money these legislators take from Duke Energy? Is there anyone trying to get a pledge so that they don't take the money? What can you say about that?
The pledge has come up some in the past, and we'll be talking with allies about that possibility. NC Warren and Appalachian Voices, with help from Democracy NC's former ED Bob Hall, have exposed Duke Energy's financial spending at the legislature and in the governor's races too. And the same song you described, lots of money for both parties. And as Bob Dylan said, money doesn't talk, it swears. And it sure does make a mess in North Carolina, but there's been more attention to that. And again, I think Duke Energy's fighting an uphill battle, and our side just needs to keep the pressure on. Folks can go to stopdukeenergy.com and find ways to plug in with our organization. We've got a lot of good ally groups around the state, and we need to keep the pressure on them. And the pressure on Roy Cooper to walk his talk on climate change.
And I'll just add, I think the monies and programs that have come out of the bipartisan infrastructure law, as well as that was passed in November of 2021, and then the Inflation Reduction Act was passed August. Those programs are going to make a huge difference, as I said earlier, in terms of giving people a chance, the money, the rebates, the direct pay to nonprofit organizations, et cetera, that will move the conversation in a much more progressive direction in terms of renewable energy, energy saving, energy efficiency. And what I'd like to see is more organizations helping their local communities, local homeowners, local churches, schools. We're working with the Durham public school system here where I am to take advantage of those monies, either through grants or through understanding exactly how the rebates and tax incentives work. So I think that happening over the next couple of years will definitely change the conversation when we come around to voting.
Well, great. On that optimistic note, we must end our show. And I want to ask everybody to contact Governor Cooper, whichever way you want. If you want to use the forum, I'll put it in the links in the comments. Or if you just want to call his office or tweet at him, however you like to do your political advocacy. And also share this show. I'm on Facebook. You're watching it on Facebook at facebook.com/lauren.steiner.la. And on Twitter, my handle is Lauren_Steiner. And on YouTube, it's youtube.com/Lauren.Steiner. So thank you very much. Next week, I'm going to be doing my show on Twitter and all the interesting things that have happened since Elon Musk took it over. And yeah, that's all I have to say. So thanks, guys, for being on the show. I really enjoyed having you.
Thank you
Thank
for
you,
having
Lauren.
us, Lauren. Yeah.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.